So we got a lot of news to catch up on, guys. I hope everybody had a good holiday weekend. We're gonna hop right into it, man. So some of you guys may have already heard about this because I reported the initial incident over a week ago. Now there was a 7-year-old that had been shot and killed in front of his mother inside of a home on the west side. Very common occurrence in Chicago, man. Kids being killed inside homes when these bullets go through. And this was due to a gang-related shooting, as is very often the case. And there were initially about a week ago, 3 teens charged. Not quite a week ago, like maybe 4 or 5 days ago, there were 3 different teens charged in this case. Charges have been dropped against one of them. Okay, so there's a 19-year-old named Joseph Serrano who is also charged in the shooting, and I believe the charges against him are still going at this point. So another suspect, they said, had been charged after a 7-year-old boy was killed by a stray bullet inside his Humboldt Park home last month. Akeem Briscoe was shot in the stomach by a stray bullet on the night of October 26th as he was inside of his Humboldt Park home washing his hands and getting ready for bed. Earlier this week, police said that a 16-year-old boy is charged with murder in Akeem's death. Police said he was 15 at the time of the shooting and is being charged as a juvenile, so his name is not being released because of his age. On Thursday morning, police said that 2 more suspects, a 19-year-old named Joseph Serrano and an 18-year-old, were each charged with murder. However, later Thursday, court records show that the state's attorney's office dropped that charge against the 18-year-old. So why they dropped the charge or why they charged him in the first place, I don't know. But police said the stray bullet pierced a window of the boy's home after gunfire erupted in the alley in the 2600 block of West Potomac. No one from those 2 groups were injured, but the bullet went into Akeem's home, striking and killing him. So I've reported numerous times about these gang shootings when no gang members, 0, are hit, and nothing but innocent people are hit. And this was another case just like that. So a separate group from the alley were targeting that group that was in their car in the alley. And this, according to the CPD chief of detectives, he said they shoot at that group. Obviously, the bullet misses that group. There was nobody struck in that group, and the bullet goes through the window, striking the 7-year-old. So police said the 2 adults have also been taken into custody in relation to the case. And what their role is, I don't know. And police are pursuing charges against them as well. But they appear not to have been involved in the actual shooting itself, I don't think. CPD said that the teen boy did not fire the shots that killed Akeem. And this is something to pay attention to for everybody, all the teens that are out there doing this type of stuff. He did not fire the shots, but he was in possession of the gun, and he handed it to one of the adults who then fired the fatal shot. So the teen actually gave the gun to the adult. The adult fired the gun. Police said that a family member, and they didn't say if Serrano is the guy that fired the gun or if it was one of the other 2 guys that they're looking to charge, but police said that a family member told them that the boy was in the bathroom when a bullet came through the window and struck him. Police said they do not believe anyone inside the residence was the intended target of the shooting. Akeem was shot in front of his mother and his 2 siblings. They had just buried his father the previous weekend, who had died from a medical condition. Crazy, man. His father had just died from a medical condition, so the mother had just lost her husband, and now she loses her son. And this is all basically like within the same couple weeks span. A reward of up to $15,000 has been offered for information in the case. Investigators are working the case, which has drawn the attention of Mayor Lightfoot. She said, "This didn't happen in a vacuum. There are people out there right now that within the sound of my voice who know exactly what happened, and you must come forward." So Newberry Math and Science Academy's principal said that the loss is sure to raise a lot of emotions and questions for the entire school. Apparently that's where the 7-year-old went. And I don't know too much about that school. I never worked over there. I was working high school, but yeah, condolences to everybody, his classmates and everything. I know how that is, when you come back and, there's been a loss like that. This is just crazy. But so in a statement, the Cook County State's Attorney's Office said, quote, the Cook County State's Attorney's Office has an ethical obligation only to bring forth charges when they are supported by the facts, evidence, and law. On October 26, 2022, 7-year-old Akeem Briscoe was tragically and senselessly killed by gunfire while he was inside his home. We have reviewed the evidence in this case and have charged 2 individuals with first-degree murder. A 3rd individual was arrested and CPD filed charges against him, but the Cook County State's Attorney's Office has not yet made a charging decision as to this 3rd offender. As always, As additional evidence is gathered, we stand ready to bring charges when appropriate. Our communities are plagued by horrific violence that claims too many innocent victims. However, we must adhere to our ethical and legal obligations in evaluating charges. So that's a valid point. I mean, that's a valid point. If I haven't seen what evidence they have, but they got to make sure that they do. If they have the guy who passed the gun, and if they have the shooter, the other people, the people that were involved in some other way, that's not essential at this point. But that's something that's worth taking their time on. When it comes to the shooter or the suspected shooter himself, that's something I feel like they need to at least hold the guy. But yeah, the rest of them, they can take their time on that, man. But yeah, hopefully they'll bring this to a quick conclusion, man. Because man, that mom, she just lost her husband and then her 7-year-old son in 1 week, and he died in front of her, got killed right in front of her. Bullet that came through the window, and he wasn't doing nothing wrong to nobody. So rest in peace to 7-year-old Akeem Briscoe, man. And this is just another example of how the gang thing always goes in Chicago. And what I keep on saying to these young kids, man, when they hear the older guys, talking about this stuff, because they never bring this type of stuff up, which is the reality of it, in the songs and all that kind of thing. Well, sometimes they bring it up. Some of the guys who keep it real, they bring it up, but this is the vast majority of what happens. So what these guys' particular gang affiliation is, I don't know, but that area right there is a border area between Maniac Latin Disciples. It's a heavy area with a lot of D's in it, and Insane Spanish Cobras. And they're more like mortal enemies. But there's also Jivers right there. So, but these guys might not have been from any of those gangs. To the south of that, there's also Dragons, like a few blocks to the south of that. These guys might have been from some other neighborhood coming through there. So I don't know if these guys are members of any of those gangs. But the Maniac Latin Disciples on the northwest side of Chicago are extremely deep. I would say as far as Hispanic gangs, them and the Kings are probably the two deepest gangs on the northwest side. They completely had a couple of the high schools where I worked at, especially Steinmetz. And then the Cobras were heavy at Kelvin Park. But the Cobras, they have a block over there though. And the Cobras, as far as the south side, I don't really know too many Cobra neighborhoods. They have a lot of neighborhoods on the north side though, like the northwest side. That's kind of like an interesting mix. But yeah, every block around there basically is gangs. And so if your kid is growing up in that area, there's a lot of pressure to join that. There's a lot of pressure to join that, man. I saw this firsthand. And it's not necessarily like they're going to jump you and, ask you where you're from and all that kind of thing. There's definitely a lot of guys over there who do claim neutron, but man, they got to resist temptation to do that, because the girls, I'm telling you, the girls in these neighborhoods, man, they go for gangbangers big time. The easy money. And I'm not saying that this is just this neighborhood, because I've seen this in some other neighborhoods too, but I would say it's a little bit more in these neighborhoods, because these are actual gangs that you have to join. It's not like just a block, like you get on the south side. But a lot of guys just getting picked on. I saw this definitely firsthand, guys who were just getting bullied, made fun of, picked on. And, eventually they just reach their breaking point. And, in those situations, you can either go one or two ways. If you can turn to God for strength and prayer, you can turn to the devil and grab a 30 clip and go out and get respect like that. And if you have to have that respect, if you can't get the love, which you're not going to get from, the people around you, then the respect for a lot of guys is the next best thing, and they're willing to do anything to get it. And so they basically become part of the same problem that was, pressing them in the first place. Ironically, the sheep can protect himself by turning into the wolf. And that's basically what you see happening. And then they ironically turn around and start doing that to other people. And it becomes a vicious cycle. Yeah, the devil, man, he'll knock you down with one hand and offer you a hand up with the other, and then not let go. That's how it goes. I see this cycle over and over and over again. At any rate, man, rest in peace to Akeem. And as far as preventing this kind of a thing, there's nothing you can do. What do you do? He was already inside of his home. You can't. In Cabrini Green, I know that on some nights they used to, sleep in the bathtubs because the stray bullets would be coming through the windows and stuff. But I mean, that's not realistic in this day and age, like to do that all the time. Like Humboldt Park, yeah, it goes down over there, man. Humboldt Park is like, it's like northwest side slash west side. Some people consider it the west side, some people consider it the northwest side, but Humboldt Park's a very interesting neighborhood because the eastern part has been heavily gentrified, and there's a lot of young urban professionals of all different races that have moved into that neighborhood in the last 10, 20 years, and it's totally changed from the way it was like in the 90s when I was a kid. But the western part of Humboldt Park really is in a lot of ways like an extension of Garfield Park. And the border where it starts to get like that, I would say, is like I did a video a couple of years ago where I drove it back when I still had the car, where I was driving down North Avenue like westbound, and I showed you guys the change and how quickly it changes after you. I would say it changes like after you pass the park, like you get to California, you get to Kedzie. After Kedzie, like you're in it, like you're on the west side of Chicago. East of like Western, I would say you're really basically in another neighborhood like that you could consider the near north side. You know, that's really, even though this is all considered one neighborhood, I consider it kind of split like that. Like east of Western, Humboldt Park really now is like, you know, it's like you're in Wicker Park or Bucktown or some area like that. But west of Kedzie, oh no, yeah, no, you're in like Garfield Park, and that basically, for all practical purposes, when you get to that part, and it's a mix of like of Hispanic and black in the western part. In the eastern part, there's a lot of white, and there's Hispanic and black too in the eastern part too. But in the western part, there's Latino gangs, and this was a Latino gang thing. But then you got the vice lords, you know, when you get to the like southern edge of the western part of Humboldt Park, where it borders Garfield Park. So, yeah, rest in peace to Akeem, man. It's a very dangerous neighborhood. It's not too far from where I got almost lost my life while working security, and or high school is not too far from there. And that's not an area of the city where, if you can help it, I recommend living, because that typically falls within the top 5 most violent areas of the city. All of the numbers from Humboldt Park are really coming from that western half. So that, you know, the numbers that they put up on like those stat websites for Humboldt Park really don't tell the full story, because all of that is happening in that one little section of the neighborhood. The eastern part is sweet, you know. So if you're living in that western part of Humboldt Park, man, I keep saying it, you know, you can find an apartment for the same price if you're willing to downsize. You know, you might have to cut out 1 bedroom, maybe even cut out 2 bedrooms, and, you know, live in a studio or something, but it's worth it. It's big time worth it. And I hope every mother out there, you know, does that before, you know, something like this happens to her kid. Because, I mean, when I was working over there, and when I was like, you know, hearing the kids talk about, you know, their lives and their families and stuff, and what they go through and how many siblings they lost and everything, I'm thinking to myself, man, I'd rather sleep on a park bench, you know, than raise a kid over here. Like, and I'm not saying this to demonize or blame, you know, the mothers or anything like that. They're doing their best, and I don't know their particular situation. But if it was me, I'm like, I'm going anywhere else, you know, for cheaper, because that whole west side, that's basically an extension of Garfield Park, which is the hottest neighborhood in the city. This is your boy Winnie C. Report. I'm out.